The next speaker is Denmark's first female Imam who founded woman-led mosque in Copenhagen called Mariam Mosque. She's also an activist on Muslim issues including female integration and extremism and has written numerous texts discussing Islam and politics. This year, she received the Hero Prize, Global Hope Award from UNESCO, and last year she featured on BBC's 100 Most Influential Women Pioneers list for the world. Please welcome Mrs. Sherin Khankan.
It's August 2016. I'm preparing myself to lead the first Friday prayer in the Mariam Mosque in Copenhagen. I'm putting on my galabia, a Syrian dress that I got as a present from my father, who is a political refugee from Syria. It's the very same dress that I'm wearing today. My 4 children are watching me. They know that something is at stake. They know that today we're going to write history in the Mariam Mosque because for the first time, female activists will lead the prayer in a mosque of women with female imams. My youngest daughter at that time, Halima Mariam, who's 5 years old, she has a friend visiting our house. It's a Danish non-Muslim girl with light hair and blue eyes. And she whispers into my daughter's ears, "What is an imam?" And I will never forget the look in my daughter's eyes when she says out loud with a proud voice, "Don't you know? An imam is a woman who's doing great things." The story shows us that it's possible to change a concept that has been male-dominated for decades into the mind of a 5-year-old child within a second. And she's absolutely right. Female imams is not a new phenomenon. We have female imams in China since the 1820s. In US, Amina Wadud, the great female Muslim scholar, led the prayer for her community consisting of both men and women in 2005. In South Africa in 1994. In Morocco, the state educates 50 religious teachers, the so-called murshidats, every year in order to combat the growing radicalization. There are female imams in Germany, in UK, Switzerland. And it's also not a reformation. In the very first house mosque in the Islamic civilization in Medina in year 600, we know of at least 3 women who led the prayer. Aisha, Salama, they led the prayer in the house mosque of the Prophet Muhammad himself after he died in 632. And while he was alive, he appointed a woman named Waraka to lead the prayer for her household. So how come that we have normalized these patriarchal structures in our societies, in the families, within our religious institutions? There are various reasons for this. One of them is that the second caliph, Omar, in 634, told women that they could stay in their houses, that it was not obligated for them to go to the mosque and to pray or to lead the prayer. So he forbade women to lead the prayer. So today we are living and we have normalized these patriarchal structures. When you start a mosque with female imams in Scandinavia, you get the question of legitimacy. In Denmark, we had the first female priest ordained within the Protestant Church in 1948. And they got the same question of legitimacy. And our legitimacy is based on knowledge, it's based on theology, and it's based on the acute needs in our societies. And I'm here with you to share some of the acute needs in our societies, in the European societies, among the minority of Muslims. We have developed 9 theses of reform based on the acute needs in Europe among Muslims. These 9 theses are, first of all, Muslim women's right to serve as female imams. And we already implemented that by creating a mosque led by female imams. 6 different female imams have led the prayer during the last 6 years. 6 different women have given the sermon and are actively disseminating new narratives on Islam in Europe based on gender equality. The second thesis is Muslim women's right to divorce, Muslim women's right to interfaith marriage. It's a fight against female genital mutilation. 30% of girls in Egypt are being subjected to this kind of violence. It's a rereading of the Quran with a focus on gender equality. It's disseminating Sufism, which is the spiritual path in Islam, to European societies. It's a fight against the growing anti-Islamic rhetoric and propaganda, Islamophobia, as well as anti-Semitism. It's a fight against the patriarchal structures, the patriarchal readings of the Quran. And I would like to elaborate on 2 of the 9 theses. And these 2 theses are, to me, some of the most acute dilemmas that we are facing in the youth today. The first one is the thesis about interfaith marriages. I have 4 children. I have 2 girls and 2 boys in the age of 7 and 14. My 2 girls, what are the chances of them growing up and falling in love with a non-Muslim? It's quite huge because we live in Europe, we live in Denmark. But the father of my children, he would argue that this is never going to happen because I, he says, have raised my children so well, so they will not even think about falling in love with a non-Muslim. They will not even dream about falling in love with a non-Muslim. And this opinion is not rare. You find it among religious Jews, religious Christians, and religious Muslims. It's actually quite mainstream. Religious Jews are not allowed to marry outside Judaism. So, how do we tackle this issue or this dilemma? According to the Quran, Muslim women are not allowed to marry outside their religion, if you look at the mainstream interpretations, because it is stated clearly that a Muslim man can marry a Jew or a Christian or outside, but it is not stated that a woman can do the same. And because of this, there is a consensus among the majority of Muslim leaders around the world, also in Europe, that Muslim women cannot marry outside Islam. In the Mariam Mosque, I have conducted more than 30 Islamic marriages during the last 2 years, and half of them are interfaith marriages, meaning a practicing Muslim woman and a non-Muslim. We have couples coming from France, from UK, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, because they cannot find an imam who will conduct their Islamic ceremony. Then another theme that I would like to introduce you to is the theme of divorce. Today, Muslim women do not even have the basic right to divorce according to the Islamic practices. And this is quite unusual actually, because according to Islam, it's a woman's right to divorce. And you might think that why is this important? We live in Europe. Why is this a problem? Because you can easily divorce according to Danish law, Swedish law, Finnish law. And it is only European law that counts in European countries. But if you are a practicing Muslim, it counts. The Islamic marriage counts spiritually, religiously, psychologically, and the Islamic divorce counts spiritually, religiously. I, at a daily basis, are contacted by women who are subjected to psychological violence, abuse, and we are also contacted by women who are trapped in religious marriages because they cannot find a single imam in Denmark who will give them the divorce because the husband refuses. So we have women today trapped in these religious marriages. Therefore, in the Maria Mosque, we have constructed a new Islamic marriage contract that gives Muslim women the right to divorce. Polygamy is forbidden. If mental or physical violence occur, the marriage is annulled. We also made a fusion between Danish legislation and Islamic guidance. So it is stated clearly in the contract that if you're divorced according to Danish law, you are immediately divorced Islamically. So what we want to do is that we would like to standardize this contract. We would like to go inside to the Muslim communities and ask them whether they would reconsider changing their contract. And I would also like to make an appeal to you as politicians and decision makers in order to look at the existing law. What do we demand from our religious communities in our societies? When they apply to become a new faith community, what kind of standards do they have to live up to? Do we look at gender equality? Do we look at women's right to divorce? Do we look at the topic of interfaith marriage? My 4 children, they love to play chess, especially my boys. They are 9 and 10 years old. And recently, I asked them, do you know what the meaning of checkmate is? Do you know the meaning? And they said no. And I told them that the word checkmate in Danish, it's called skakmat. Checkmate descends either from the Persian shah-mat or the Arabic sheikh-mat. And the sheikh or the shah, it's the king, it's the ruler, it's the leader, the male leader. And mat in Arabic, it means dead. So my daughter Aisha, who's 14 years old, she said, be aware, Muslim brothers, the sheikh is dead, long live the female imams. Sometimes we think it's impossible to change status quo. We think it's impossible to change a structure because it has been normalized for decades. But we can give a lot of talks and we can have a lot of conferences. But things will stay the same until someone comes along and just create that change. Thank you.
Dear Mrs. Khankan, thank you so much for your powerful talk, for all the ideas. Dear audience, questions? Let's take the gentleman behind there.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
I mean, your positions are very liberal. Have you experienced any attacks or have you suffered from other people who are not seeing your positions in a positive light?
Thank you for your question. Of course, when you change a structure, you change the power balance. And I was quite prepared, or we were quite prepared, because we are a group of activists, we are a movement. We were prepared for the opposition that we have met. I could talk about the opposition now, or I could use another strategy, which is the strategy that I prefer, and that is not to talk about the opposition. Because if you talk about the opposition, every time you talk about it, this is a narrative that you send out to the world. And then it is being repeated, and it becomes more legitimate for people to oppose you. So instead, I tell the stories of support. I tell the story of the Grand Imam who came all the way from Indonesia to Denmark, and he blessed the mosque. He quoted one of my inspirational sources, Ibn Arabi, who's the great reformator within the Islamic tradition, who lived from 1165 until 1240 and who said the perfect man is a woman. The Grand Imam from Indonesia represents 300,000 Muslims at his Friday prayers. So he took the message of the Mariam Mosque back to Indonesia and he spread the word. I tell the story of Sheikh Fadlallah, who came all the way from South Africa and who's a great scholar. So this is how I tackle the opposition. It's a very clear strategy. But I have to admit that I have met opposition from outside and also from within. Actually, there were two men that I did not tell that I was going to be one of the female imams in the Mariam Mosque. That was my father and my husband at that time, 2 years ago. And I knew that they would oppose it of very different reasons. I remember my father, he called me and he said, I got a message from Syria from a family member who told me that you were one of the female imams and you promised me that you would be the woman behind the mosque and not in front. And my father told me, you have to denounce the title. You cannot call yourself a female imam. It's impossible. You are breaking the tradition and you have to wear the scarf all the time and you have to at least be able to recite the Quran by heart, the whole of it. That was his criteria. But I knew that it was a matter of him fearing the consequences. And I didn't denounce the title, obviously, and he didn't speak to me for a month, but today he's very proud.
Who wants to go next? Yep.
Hello. Thank you very much for your very inspiring speech.
Thank you.
I guess that many European countries are facing the same problems. So my question is, do you meet often, or is there any organization at the European level where you meet your counterpart to exchange on this practice?
We are in the process now of cooperating also at a political level in order to spread the message and to share our reflections and ideas of how to change the status quo. Next year, we are planning a conference in Münster. Münster in Germany has one of the largest center for Islamic theology in Europe. They have 800 students, Muslim students, 5 professors, and a lot of PhD students. So we're going to have the conference together with them, and we already got everything sponsored, and we're going to invite all the existing female imams from all around the world, from China to US to Europe, and the leading Muslim scholars, a few female rabbis, and female priests also. And then we're going to look at I don't know if you showed the 9th thesis? No.
You can put them on.
And then we're going to discuss the 9th thesis to find theological evidence behind every thesis, collect it. So when people want to start an initiative like this, they have a much easier way to tackle all these issues. And they have the legitimacy, also theological legitimacy.
And young lady, there on the 3rd row, please.
Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation and a lot to think for us in European Union. And I wonder if there is an impact on across the sea, on the Mediterranean, and if you have a strategy towards that region. I think they also have to look what we are doing and what you are doing, and I hope it will have a positive impact on the Muslim society across the sea as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that Tunisia, as one of the first Muslim countries, they changed the law last year in December 17. So now it's possible for Muslim women to marry non-Muslims. And they are in the process now of changing some of the laws that are discriminatory against women. They are met with a lot of opposition, both from inside and from outside, but in the future it could create a domino effect.
Do we have anyone who wants to go for the last question? If not, then I'll take that question for myself. You were mentioning that you don't want to mention the threats. because that creates a wrong kind of narrative, that it is the positive feedback that keeps you going. The question is, I believe that in the beginning you didn't necessarily have that yet. So what was the true inspiration? What got you going? Why did you want to become a female imam, knowing the hardship and the struggle you would have to go through to actually achieve your goal?
I come from a very safe upbringing. My father is a political refugee from Syria. My mother is a Finnish immigrant. I was born in between Christianity and Islam, the village and the city, East and West. They managed to combine. They are united in diversity. They combine these different religions. We fasted with my father. We celebrated Christmas with my mother. But in my adult life, I had my own experiences with psychological violence, with patriarchal structures. And I think that if I haven't had my share of hardships, if I haven't tasted the patriarchal structure on my own body, I know it's not a very concrete way of discussing this, but I wouldn't have started the Mariam Mosque. So with everything that I do, with the Exit Circle and the Mariam Mosque, I have a personal experience with everything that I do. I challenge patriarchal structures in the secular sphere through the Exit Circle, which is a secular NGO where we have established self-help groups for people subjected to psychological abuse. And the Mariam Mosque, it's also challenging patriarchal structures, but it's in the religious sphere. Thank you.
Dear Mrs. Khankan, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.